The Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast says that the Denver Broncos had a worse offseason than the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll tell you why we disagree with that and much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Happy Tuesday, and welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For all your Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more, this is the place to be every single day, all year long. So a special shout out to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day, however you choose to do so. And become an everydayer. If you're not one already, it's easy. All you have to do is hit that subscribe or that follow button wherever you get your podcast or YouTube, and you'll stay locked in to your favorite team, the Denver Broncos. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. You can check out my written work and daily coverage of the team over there, as well as this podcast every single day.
And I'm Sayre Bedinger. You can find my written work over at predominantlyorange.com and rocking with your boy Cody every single day here at Locked On Broncos.
And we're also available on Bleacher Report on Wednesdays. We do some fun streams there, but always trying to get in front of the eyes of Broncos Country to bring them the best Broncos content out there. And speaking of that, here's what you're going to get on today's episode of the show. Our good friends over there at the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, our good friends Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs. They dished on the best off seasons by every NFL team. They had the Kansas City Chiefs ahead of the Denver Broncos, and we kind of took a little bit of an issue with that. So we're going to talk about that here, obviously, on today's show. And then we're going to dive into mandatory minicamp beginning here today. We're going to be out there at practice, but we're going to take a look at three offensive storylines that we have our eyes on, including Bo Nix's chemistry with the wide receiver group, and then three defensive storylines that also sees the return of John Franklin Myers and how that cornerback depth is going to shake out, because it is very deep right now as the team prepares for training camp. We're going to break all that down here today. Sayre, let's open things up here by talking about something our good friends over there at the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes. Obviously, Joe Marino, Kyle Krabs, our good friends. We love them. They do fantastic work there. Obviously, Joe covers Locked On Bills. Kyle covers Locked On Dolphins. But then they do this national show where they share their expertise, from their draft background here. I disagreed when they came out with their top 10 off seasons of this year. The Denver Broncos made it into both of their top 10s. I just disagreed with the placement. Let's take a look here. First and foremost, the Broncos come in at 7th for Joe Marino. They come in at 8th for Kyle Krabs. And Kyle's Kansas City is ranked number 1 as having the best NFL offseason. And then they're ranked 6th as having the best NFL offseason, according to Joe. I disagree with that. I think you can make arguments that the Broncos had a better offseason than a team like Kansas City.
Yeah, I think you can make an argument that the Chiefs had one of the worst off seasons in the NFL, right? I mean, when you look at a lot of the losses that they had, I guess two notable ones, really Joe Thuney on the offensive line and then Justin Reid defensively. And Justin Reid, Cody, kind of represents a sort of mass exodus over the last handful of years in the defensive backfield for that Kansas City team. Of course, Charvarius Ward a couple of years ago, and then L'Jarius Sneed last offseason. Now Justin Reid this offseason. I guess if you want to take it a step further, you could go back to Tyrann Mathieu leaving that group. And yeah, Steve Spagnuolo has done a great job of developing guys on that side of the ball. Trent McDuffie, really good player, but man, you lose a guy like Justin Reid, and he's been a key piece to that defense. They've been so good over the last couple of years. Justin Reid has been a key piece for them. And then the offensive line was already bad, and now you lost arguably your best guy, right? And Joe Thuney, who's now with the Chicago Bears. You bring in a guy like Josh Simmons to play left tackle for you, first-round pick for the Chiefs this year. That could work out. He could be maybe the best left tackle from this year's rookie class, but also he dealt with injury last year at Ohio State. And that can't be just, poo-pooed or shoved to the side as he gets to the NFL level where he's now going to be facing off against, really good pass rushers. So I don't know. I wouldn't have put the Chiefs in the top 10 of off seasons, much less number 1. I think that's crazy. I mean, and we love, like you said, we love Joe and Kyle. They do awesome work. They're awesome to work with. I don't know that I would have Kansas City anywhere near the top 10 of off. They definitely don't come to mind when I think, hey, who's the most improved roster in the NFL this offseason? I definitely don't think of the Kansas City Chiefs off the top of my head.
Well, and we got Minnesota for Joe Marino. Minnesota comes in at third. I think that they made some key additions this offseason, but the biggest question for them is going to be JJ McCarthy, how that goes forward, right? So in terms of which teams did the most to improve their rosters, I think you can make a strong argument about the Broncos, and then Arizona is ranked in their top 5 in each of them. Like in Joe's, Arizona comes in at 4th. And then in Kyle's, they come in at number 2 overall here. And when you look at the key moves that Arizona made this offseason, obviously they agreed to terms with Calais Campbell on a contract, on a 1-year deal. Calais isn't the guy that, we were seeking like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We're like, hey, Calais Campbell, bring him back to the Mile High City, bring him to Colorado here. Obviously, they added young guys in the draft there. They signed Zay Jones. They got Josh Sweat on a 4-year contract, obviously there. Jacoby Brissett to back up Kyler Murray. To me, I look at all these moves and I'm like, all right, well, that's not necessarily like needle moving in a sense that, okay, hey, they had the best offseason overall from this standard. And when we talk about rookies, you always have to approach it from the basis of we don't know what these guys are going to be just yet. So that's where I would disagree with them on Arizona. I think when you look at Denver's key additions, right, let's look at it defensively, addressing 2 of their most crucial needs defensively, inside linebacker and safety. You get Dre Greenlaw, you get Talanoa Hufanga, you sign those guys in free agency. You give Bo Nix a player like Evan Engram, who the Broncos have been desperately looking for a player with that type of archetype and potential to put inside of Sean Payton's offense. You get him one of the biggest needs offensively. And when we look at the draft, like even on our side, as we talk about the draft, on paper right now, the Broncos, they had a terrific draft, I think, in their first, in their premium picks here. Jahdae Barron, I think, can be a great weapon here for the Broncos defense. I'm excited to see that. RJ Harvey, who's getting all this rookie buzz right now, and rightfully so. There's a lot of excitement about what he's going to bring to the table. These guys got to go out there and play first, right? So when we factor in, I think, off seasons and improving, I think we really have to look at it from the free agency standpoint. Who did they lose? Who did they gain? I think when you look at Denver compared to maybe, most teams even in the AFC West, I think Denver did the most to improve because they were already really competitive last season. Their roster was a big surprise to a lot of people. They got better in the areas they absolutely needed to, and they should be infinitely better because of that this upcoming season. So I would argue, let's maybe look at it from this standpoint, Sayre. If we could put the Denver Broncos anywhere in the top 10 in terms of offseason for most improved rosters, if we could change their placement in Joe and Kyle's rankings, where would we put the Broncos here amongst the teams on a 1 through 10? Where would we go?
Well, I think the Broncos, no matter what way you slice it, they had a top 3 overall offseason in terms of most improved rosters in the league. I know you have to factor the injury risk in, just like I said with Josh Simmons and the Chiefs. So you have to factor that in. But we're talking about a proven couple of guys in Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga, as opposed to a rookie coming out of Ohio State who, hasn't ever played in the NFL. We're talking about Evan Engram, who was second all time in the single season catches list for tight ends ever in NFL history. And then you factor in Jahdae Barron, who was Pro Football Focus. Everybody had him as their top cornerback in the draft outside of Travis Hunter, right? The draft dudes love Jahdae Barron coming out. And we know this. Everybody loves Jahdae Barron. And the Broncos stole him with the 20th overall pick. It's one of those situations to where I think there's just like a sort of fatigue with, good stuff from Bo Nix last year. Good stuff. That was fine. We'll see if he can do it again, right? I think everybody's still skeptical whether Sean Payton and Bo Nix can do it again after last year, because what are we seeing now, Cody? The narratives are that, hey, the Broncos, they beat up on bad teams. They couldn't beat any good teams. Well, you said the Broncos were a bad team, so they beat up on the bad teams. What does that say about them? How many times are we going to move the goalposts before we have a legitimate conversation? And I think, it's nice to be in the top 10, right? It's nice to be recognized as having one of the best off seasons, but I do think it's a little bit ridiculous to say that teams like Arizona, having a better, more improved roster than Denver this year, I think that's wild. You're talking about a Broncos team that's bringing back 86% of their guys from last year and adding Greenlaw, Hufanga, Evan Engram, Jahdae Barron, RJ Harvey, potentially J.K. Dobbins in the near future. So I don't know, Cody. I don't agree with a lot of the offseason rankings lists. I think that's part of why they get put out, right? Is so that people will disagree and talk about it. And, it's not necessarily clickbait. It's just discussion driving. And I think that with these two guys, like, why is Buffalo on that list? Who did Buffalo bring in other than two guys who are suspended for 6 games to start the season? Like, Buffalo didn't do much. Their draft was fine. They didn't bring anybody in.
I will say Kyle doesn't have Buffalo on his list.
Yeah, Kyle doesn't have Buffalo even on the list, and Joe doesn't have Dallas on the list. But Dallas, I think Dallas did more than most of these teams, right? And nobody talks about that. Why? Because I think people kind of love to hate on the Cowboys. It's just, I don't understand the Chiefs being on the list. I don't understand the Bills being on the list. The Colts, Cody. The Colts being a top 10 most improved team in the league. They got Daniel Jones to come and compete with Anthony Richardson. Wow. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if the Colts are going to be better than they were last year. So I think it's a tough thing to, it's a tough game to play this time of year.
Yeah. Well, Broncos Country, let us know what you think of, obviously, the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast with the Draft Dudes, Joe Marino, Kyle Krabs, their list of rankings where the Broncos fell. To recap here, the Broncos for Joe Marino came in at 7th in terms of the most improved offseason roster. They came in 8th for Kyle Krabs. Let us know how you feel about that on today's episode show. Make sure you comment your thoughts on where Denver should be. We are eager to see where you think they're at here, Broncos Country. But we're not done yet. Mandatory minicamp begins today, and we're going to take a look at 3 offensive storylines here for the Broncos offense going into today's practice, including the chemistry that Bo Nix has with the Broncos wide receivers. You're going to get that and much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode, Locked On Broncos, is brought to you by our friends over there at Monarch Money. You're like me. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between all the different recurring subscriptions, between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, going out and buying coffee, something that I do very, very often. It's easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, folks. It's a complete financial command center that gives you everything all at your fingertips, where you can track all of your accounts, your investments, and spending in one place, so you stop managing your money and you start building wealth.
Well, and with Monarch Money, you're going to realize just how much you're spending on certain things, because they have a lot of surprising insights. If you struggle with budgeting, you're going to find out exactly where you're spending too much money with that command center that Cody mentioned with Monarch Money. Plus, you don't have to use a bunch of different apps. It's that all-in-one convenience that makes Monarch Money so special. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Everybody is excited to find out more about the Denver Broncos offense as minicamp rolls along. And now we're at mandatory minicamp. So going to be interesting to see if the intensity ramps up. What are the biggest question marks for this Broncos team? Well, we're wondering about Bo Nix, the chemistry with his receivers. We're wondering if anybody's going to enter that running back competition, maybe a little J.K. Dobbins, and a lot more. Broncos Country, thanks so much for tuning in today. We're talking Broncos mandatory minicamp, and we appreciate every single one of you for rocking with us. Cody, I know you're going to be out there at practice, and every eye will be on the offensive side of the ball. Of course, I know as a defensive backs guy, you're going to be watching them, and we'll talk about the defense coming up here in a bit, but that offense is the unit that needs to take that step forward for the Broncos to maybe lay claim to the AFC West this year. I think that's a reasonable discussion to be had. They won't be necessarily coming up from, hey, out of nowhere. The Broncos were good last year, and I think teams are going to be expecting them to be good, but the offense has to improve. I think one of the number one things we're watching out for is that chemistry between Bo Nix and a group of receivers that you and I have talked about. A lot of guys are going to hit the field. It doesn't necessarily matter who's atop the depth chart. He's got to be building chemistry with a number of different guys right now.
Yeah, look, not even just at wide receiver. We're talking running back. We're talking tight end. Bo Nix is getting a lot of work with a lot of guys. And that's one thing that I think I like about what Sean Payton does with his operation is yeah, there will be times where Courtland Sutton's in at wide receiver. There might be a time where during a time where Courtland is in playing X, they may throw in Courtney Jackson, an undrafted guy, to play the Z position or play in the slot. Like, they want to get a lot of reps, right? And I think it's a good way for your quarterback to get chemistry with everybody. We already know he's got chemistry with Cortland Sutton. He's got chemistry with Marvin Mims. He's got chemistry, obviously, with Devon Vele. But now it's like, can you continue to build that chemistry with rookie Pat Bryant? Can you continue to build that chemistry with some of the undrafted guys? Because, hey, you never know. This season, as we've seen historically for this Broncos team over the course of its history, there have been undrafted guys that have emerged to become maybe a favorite target. Maybe there's something that one guy does really well that it's the go-to. It's the secret sauce. Remember, George Payton and Sean Payton all offseason, they've been talking about, we got to find that secret sauce here. Could it be Evan Engram? Could it be RJ Harvey? Could it be an undrafted guy maybe getting in the mix a little bit? I don't know. Could it be Troy Franklin? I didn't mean to exclude his name and all the guys we're talking about. Those guys have plenty of chemistry together. So for me, I look at this as like, this is very important. As many reps as you can. And the best part about it is you get to go against a very good secondary with Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, Jaquan McMillan, Jahdae Barron working in, Talanoa Hufanga, and Brandon Jones on the back end there. That to me is an exciting thing. That chemistry factor, Sayre, is very, very important. And I'm excited to see how they continue to build that. And especially with Bo Nix and Evan Engram, as we've seen him move really well in the first 2 weeks of OTAs, in which we were able to see 2 practices out of those 6 total practices that they had. That's one of them. And look, I think everyone's going to be keeping their eye this week on the running back position. Will the Broncos add? Will J.K. Dobbins at some point sign? Will we see Jahdae Barron, RJ Harvey sign the rookie deals, which will allow the Broncos to make a move to bring in a guy like Dobbins? So I know the Broncos have interest in him and he still has interest in them. I think right now that's just the waiting game. That's the obstacle. And especially with Blake Watson, he's on the side field last week, Sayre, working, through after we hyped him up and talked about maybe his underrated role he could have. If he's not out there, they may look to add another back, and J.K. Dobbins could be the guy that comes in, and that could push somebody out of the mix. Could be Watson, could be Audric Estime, as we've talked about. But that running back rotation, how guys do, is going to be very important as well this week.
Yeah, and you wonder how much the signing of Nick Chubb with the Houston Texans is going to push J.K. Dobbins to finally get a deal done, because it's still a month away, but as of July 22nd, the Los Angeles Chargers have exclusive negotiating rights with J.K. Dobbins. So you would think that he's going to be motivated to get a deal done sooner than later. And yeah, the Broncos, they have their own financial hurdles to overcome and things like that. But certainly somebody like Dobbins, if you want to be part of the offensive game plan, you kind of want to get out there as soon as possible. He's not really one of those players that you say, hey, yeah, this guy can come in the middle of training camp or at the back end of training camp. He's a, proven veteran. He knows exactly what he's doing out there. He doesn't need to be out there. No, this is the installation period. This is the chemistry building period. And as we've mentioned, a lot of players that they're coming back from last year. So you're joining something that's established. And so I think for J.K. Dobbins, you would want to get this done sooner than later. So that's a big storyline to be following. But Cody, what about the fact that the J.K. Dobbins conversation has kind of pulled away a little bit from the RJ Harvey conversation, right? And RJ has been out there, sounds like he's doing great catching passes at practice, which is a big, I guess, issue from last year, or something that the Broncos are really needing in their running back room, is somebody who can be a dynamic threat out of the backfield as a receiver. That wasn't the case for really anyone last year. So, RJ Harvey coming out there looking good, continuing to grow and build his confidence, because even if J.K. Dobbins comes in, we assume RJ is going to be one of the featured players in this offense.
Yeah, Sean Payton didn't invest a premium pick just for a guy who he is really, really excited about, and he has not shied away from talking about what he really likes about Harvey. Harvey's going to get a mountain load of touches this upcoming season. He could even be the starter for the Broncos, and we talked about it a little bit in yesterday's episode of the show, why really for this Broncos team, if they're going to win 10 plus more games or even 12 games this upcoming season, the running back position and the production there is going to be the most important element of this offense, outside of obviously efficient quarterback play and making sure that you get those, chemistry down pat with the wide receivers and getting Evan Engram in the fold. The running back position is going to have a major impact. And RJ Harvey is the type of guy that I think can actually absolutely blow the top off of what this offense can do. I think we're going to see that here early on. Now, granted, everything we're seeing right now is without pads. When the pads come on at training camp, if RJ is doing this against a defense that we know was one of the top run defenses in all of the National Football League last year, that's going to excite me a little bit. And now you're going against new additions, Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga, who are very good at tracking the football. So if a guy like RJ Harvey is having success there and that Broncos offensive line stays healthy the way that they have, This is going to be something I think will be a game-changing dynamic. But how can RJ continue to grow? I'm excited to see that. You mentioned him catching passes. He caught some long passes, for a touchdown last week in OTAs. I can't tell you what the route was, but it was very nice to be able to see that, considering everything that we've seen and heard about the Broncos running back position. RJ's looking the part here. And I think that's one thing I'll keep an eye on today as I go out to practice as well. Maybe seeing a little bit of a bounce back, in this upcoming practice today from Caleb Lohner. Last week he had a drop during the team period. So can he respond and have a big day today? I'm going to keep my eye on that as kind of like this under the radar storyline to follow. But as much as we love the offensive side of the ball too, the Broncos defense, they have several storylines as well, including how to figure out what the depth at a very deep cornerback room looks like and who's going to get certain looks and opportunities to carve out a role for themselves. Sayre and I, we're going to dive deep into that here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. The Denver Broncos cornerback position is one of the deeper positions on this football team. You can even factor in the entire secondary when you add safety into the mix here, but how the Broncos cornerback rotation looks here at mandatory minicamp, getting ready for training camp, could set the table for maybe some of the established roles we may see during the regular season if this group does in fact stay healthy. We're going to go through our 3 storylines defensively that we're looking forward to. But I think before we dive into the secondary and the cornerback room here, Sayre, first and foremost, we're going to get our first look at the offseason at the return of John Franklin Myers. Obviously looking for a new contract with the Broncos. Was a very, very important addition for them last year during the NFL draft when Denver traded for them. And obviously they added Savion Jones in the NFL draft. JFM has been working. He's been putting a lot of work this offseason, and he's been working with Coach Jordan, who obviously was, a coach on the team. Coach BT Jordan was on the team last year in a specialized role back as well, if I'm not mistaken at this point. So a lot of the training that JFM has been doing has been along the lines of what the team also is looking for. So we get to see JFM back here this week as the mandatory portion of the offseason program begins. That's going to be nice because, hey, that defensive line's got some good size to it.
Yeah, it'll be good to have the whole band back together out there. And it should be mentioned that I guess this is pretty standard protocol over the last few years for JFM, Cody, as you mentioned before, that he doesn't necessarily go to the, voluntary workouts, whether he's in Denver or New York or with the Rams or whoever it may be. So this is something that's pretty standard procedure for him. Although I will say that he's been pretty vocal on Twitter X, just making his comments here and there, little subtle, hints here and there, and nothing that I think has ever indicated really that he's upset in Denver by any means. He's going to be out there, obviously, on the practice field, and that's exciting for this team because that 86% number keeps creeping back in. The continuity on the defensive line is so critical for this team. And John Franklin Myers was huge last year for the Denver Broncos, coming in as a really underrated trade acquisition, being productive as always. He seems like one of those guys that you can just kind of copy and paste his numbers every year. He's going to get quarterback hits. He's going to get pressures. He's going to make plays in the backfield. And I think that consistency is valuable. So how valuable is it, though, to the Denver Broncos? We may be fixing to find out here in the near future.
Well, I just encourage Broncos country because I think there are some fans who are on the fence about JFM, which I'm like, you shouldn't be. You should be on the fence of, hey, JFM's a damn good player. We want him on this team. Just go to his Twitter page and look at the highlights that he shared. Obviously, what Coach BT Jordan put out there of his rushes. And, it'll literally show you drills they work on in practice, them using those things and carrying them over in games, and it's leading to production. Like you're seeing JFM's size and physicality to be able to dominate in one-on-one situations. This is a dude who constantly fights through double teams as well. He has an impact on the quarterback. He's a high pressure rate player. The Broncos love that. And I think Broncos country just has to yes, the guy wants to get paid, and rightfully so. Like, wouldn't you, if you're producing, you're creating pressure and you're contributing, don't you want to get paid? Everybody else in the NFL at this position is getting paid right now. Why not at this point? I mean, JFM, I think we forget, kind of took a little bit of a pay cut when they restructured his deal coming out of the trade from New York. Now it's like, hey, I produced. I want to be able to get paid, and rightfully so. But I'm still trying to figure out how the Broncos are going to manage all that with Zach Allen, Nick Bonito, and everybody else that's coming up for a potential contract extension. It's going to be some tough moving here, though. But I think another storyline we're going to watch today is obviously the linebacker competition Alex Singleton did say that he'll probably start doing team drills once training camp rolls around. So I wouldn't expect to see Alex Singleton here today, tomorrow, or Thursday participate in any of the team drills, but he will participate in Indy. So he's doing stuff on the field with a helmet. But the linebacker competition with Dre Greenlaw set to return for training camp. He was on the side field last week, which is a great sign for him. Drew Sanders, Justin Sternad, other guys like, Jordan Turner, Rene Reed was not present last week at OTAs for that one practice we had there. And Lavelle Bailey, a guy that we've also talked about. How does this linebacker competition kind of play out here? That's something I'm looking forward to seeing here today.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going to be on my mind and on my radar, Cody, because that's the one area of this defense that was sort of a major weakness last year. Sean Payton talked after a couple of games about the coverage breakdowns, the free runners out there. That's partially the linebackers' fault, right? And the Broncos were rotating so many different guys, whether it was Quan Alexander, Zach Cunningham, even Christian Welch at the beginning of the year. Then you had Justin Sternad, Alex Singleton. I mean, all these different guys that were out there trying to sort of formulate the solution at that position, and nothing worked. And I don't know. It kind of feels like, other than Dre Greenlaw, the Broncos are just kind of running it back. And I don't know if that's the right strategy. So we really need to hear some good, positive updates about that line. I know there's no pads on, that you can only see so much out there, but even just to know that this coaching staff is confident in the guys that they have, and to have that clear direction. Yeah, there is competition, but it's these guys that are really fighting for those spots. You really want to hear the offseason hype train get going for somebody like a Drew Sanders. And that's, I mean, even without pads, that would just be nice, and I know you asked a great question. We got a great answer from Sean about the vision for him position-wise. Is he progressing? Is he a factor in the starting rotation? I think that's going to be fascinating to find out.
Well, I'll say how we can evaluate the linebackers during this period where there's no pads. Like, against the run, we can't, right? Against the pass, absolutely we can. In terms of those guys, if they're playing man, who's matching up on a running back? Are they getting out to the appropriate spot? If it's zone coverage, are they getting depth on their drop backs, and are they locating receivers crossing into their area? Like, is their reaction time? Are they moving quickly enough? Are guys getting in front of them or behind them? Those are things that we'll evaluate. I'll keep my eyes on, and obviously you'll get a bonus episode, Broncos Country of Locked On Broncos, as we react to practice. We set the table for the next day. It's going to be a fun week here on the Locked On Broncos podcast. I'm in agreement with you here. Let's get to the cornerback position here, because this is another storyline here. Sorting it out. Do the Broncos need to necessarily sort out this room right now? Because the way I see it, Sayre, it's already set in stone in terms of their key guys. Like, I'm seeing a lot of Jahdae Barron, PS2, Riley Moss, and Jaquan McMillan. There's times where we're seeing all those guys on the field at the same time, which to me, like, if I could quote John Gruden, nicey. That's got me feeling nicey at this point. And then there's times where we're seeing Jahdae working with PS2 and Riley Moss. And then there's times we're seeing Jaquan McMillan working with PS2 and Riley. Then there's times where we're seeing PS2, J-Mac, and Jahdae working in. So they're getting a lot of reps, and obviously he's picking up his role defensively very well. It's one thing that Sean Payton raved about. And then Chris Abrams-Drain's had a really good offseason as well. So those guys, in my opinion, if they keep 5, it's set. Those are the 5 guys at this point. Great burger place, by the way. But those 5 guys at corner really have it solidified there, which kind of puts Damari Mathis, Quentin Newsome, some of the other guys on the outsides. But those guys could be practice squad candidates if the team really wants them back. This is where I don't know if we're going to get any clarity on this position, but I feel like, me personally, Sayre, I would say that this cornerback room is set, barring any injuries. Those are going to be the top 5 guys.
Do you think there's any sort of issue with, when to put those guys all on the same field, or, on the field at the same time, rather? Is that an issue? Is it who's going to be out there in the base defense? Who's going to be out there in nickel? Who's going to be out there in dime? Because right now there's conversations amongst Broncos fans about, hey, Riley Moss, his job's not safe. I know you and I
It's
kind of
crazy.
agree on where. I don't know. I don't understand that discussion, and I don't know where it's coming from. Maybe it's just those last couple of games after he came back from injury. But there's discussion about, is it going to be, and we've seen some of the comments on our show as well about people factoring, well, Chris Abrams-Drain should be playing over Riley Moss, and it should be Chris Abrams-Drain, Pat Surtain, and Jaquan McMillan with Barron and Moss on the sideline. Like, it's really an interesting discussion point. So that's where I'm wondering, okay, now that you've added Barron to the mix, is it a clear pecking order of PS2, Riley Moss, and then Barron is the third guy he's going to be the first one in if somebody gets hurt. And then Macmillan is clearly the dime guy. Is that the way that you see it right now? Or do you think Chris Abrams-Draine is up in the mix there? Where do you see it at right now?
I think Abrams-Draine is in the mix if there's an injury to Riley Moss or Pat Surtain. I think strictly, I think Abrams-Draine can play inside, but I think the vision for him is an outside corner. That's where I think that the Broncos have, just based on what we saw from last year when he did play. They didn't really move him inside. They kept him outside there. That was his thing. He can play man-to-man there. I think that's perfectly fine for him to that be his vision for maybe where his trajectory is. But right now, like, people are so caught up on the Riley Moss Cincinnati Bengals game. It kind of blows my mind a little bit. Like, yeah, it was Riley's first game back from the knee injury. And was Riley full speed in that game? No. But Riley, he gave up a couple of touchdowns, but people are acting like he just absolutely got torched, whereas like there was 10, 15 yards of separation from T. Higgins and him. No, like every catch that T. Higgins really had, Riley Moss was still right there. It's just about trying to be able to make a play and finish. That's what sours me about cornerback dialogue, right? As a DB guy myself, the context of it is frustrating because people use that Cincinnati game and then they apply that to obviously the Kansas City game, which Chief starters didn't play. Riley didn't give up anything in that game. Riley played well. Riley played well in the Buffalo Bills game in the playoffs. Like Riley didn't get torched or burnt on any big plays there. Did a really good job. He had a nice, I think, pass breakup against Keon Coleman on an outside release, or even Khalil Shakur. So for me, it's just like people have soured on Riley Moss for the wrong reasons. This is nuts to me. So unless there's an injury, I think Abrams-Draine right now, the vision for him, key depth piece, but he's getting a lot of work on special teams as a gunner, Sayre, and I guarantee you he's going to be probably a starting gunner alongside Trent Sherfield this year. So that's where I think Abrams-Draine role as a year 2 player is compared to everything else right now.
Yeah, I'm fascinated for that to unfold, and I agree with you completely. I think it's well said with the whole Riley Moss discussion. I think that's one of those that Broncos Country is going to want to follow on TikTok, because that rant that you just had is going to make it to the TikTok, because I think people need to start talking a different narrative about Riley Moss and the way that he played last year. If it was any other position that played that well as a second-year guy and had a slip up here and there, yeah, I mean, we would be talking about, man, this guy's going to bust through in year 3 because he was so good for the majority of last season.
Do you remember the conversation we had when in the Vegas game when he got injured? And did you see like the games afterward? We could go through all the post-game shows, everyone in the comments saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe we lost Riley Moss. Like, oh, we need him back like ASAP. He's got to play." And then all of a sudden the narrative after a Cincinnati game just completely changed it. Like, don't be victims of the moment. Just take a deep breath. Riley is good. Yeah. He looks good this offseason. He's fast as heck. Like, he's valuable to his defense. And Sayre, like, for Broncos fans that are advocating, like, oh, trade Riley Moss away, or he doesn't need to be on the team. That's dumb.
Safety.
But think about it. If someone gets hurt, the Broncos are back kind of in a position where, like, we don't know where we're at depth-wise. Like, we got guys we think can play. They're not in a position where they have a Levi Wallace on the roster right now, but you have young guys, right? And some young guys could make some mistakes as well, but you're an injury away from just also being like, we're going to miss this guy. You're going to feel that impact. So just wild to me, man.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, all the discourse, it's very much a off-season time right now, right? You're kind of exploring almost too many options, sort of creating this need that's not necessarily even there. So that's where I tend to agree with you and say, look back at the way you felt about Riley Moss right when he got hurt against the Raiders and how devastated we were to have that injury happen at the time. That's the player that we're expecting to come back, is the guy that we were all just sick to our stomachs to lose amidst a playoff race. So I think that's going to be a fun offseason storyline to monitor. Is Sean Payton going to scoff at the idea of Riley missing out on playing time? Somebody will bring it up to him eventually, Cody, and it's going to be interesting to hear his response to that.
Sean loves Riley. I mean, go watch Kay Adams' interview last year about Riley. He doesn't hide it. He sits there and he's like, the starting corner job wasn't even announced yet, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we love Riley. Like, he's one of Sean Payton's guys. He's in the circle of trust there." Broncos Country, as always, you're in our circle of trust. We love and appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the show. If you're an everydayer, make sure you come back tomorrow. We're gonna have bonus content as well. following all the recap from today's OTA practice, previews of tomorrow's, recaps of tomorrow's. You're going to get a lot here this week at Locked On Broncos. Then I'm off to my wedding for next week. So there's a lot of fun stuff that we got in store for you this week here, Locked On Broncos. Thanks for tuning in, making us part of your day every single day. Broncos Country, we'll see you next time.